Thoreau wrote that after 2 years of living alone in a cabin in the Massachusetts woods, he wasn't describing loneliness. He was describing something the modern world has almost completely lost the ability to distinguish from loneliness, but which is neurologically and psychologically its precise opposite. We live in a culture that has pathologized being alone, that treats solitude as a symptom of depression, of social failure, of inadequacy. But the research on solitude, accumulated quietly over decades, largely ignored by a culture addicted to connection, tells a different story. Solitude is not the absence of relationship. It is one of the most sophisticated psychological tools available to the human mind, and most people have never learned to use it. Psychologists distinguish between two fundamentally different states that the English language collapses into a single word. The first is loneliness, the painful experience of unwanted isolation, of feeling disconnected from others against one's will. The second is solitude, the chosen, voluntary experience of being alone, in which the self is the primary source of engagement. These two states are not on a spectrum. They are neurologically distinct. Loneliness activates the same neural circuits as physical pain. Solitude, when chosen, activates circuits associated with self-reflection, creativity, and restoration. The difference is not how many people are present. It is who initiated the aloneness and what the mind does with it. This distinction matters because most advice about solitude misses the point entirely. Telling someone to spend time alone without teaching them what to do with that time is like telling someone to exercise without teaching them how to move. The research is specific. The psychological benefits of solitude are not automatic. They depend on the quality of the attention brought to the solitary state. Solitude without self-awareness is just loneliness with the door closed. And this is the first thing to understand about solitude as a psychological tool. It is not passive. It is not the absence of doing. It is a specific kind of presence. Presence of oneself, without the constant mediation of other people's reactions, expectations, and needs. The self in solitude has a rare opportunity to hear itself think, to notice what it actually feels, rather than what it performs feeling, to encounter its own contours without the distorting pressure of the social mirror. Human relationships require constant cognitive work. Every interaction involves a form of social cognition that psychologists call mentalizing, the continuous, largely automatic process of modeling other people's mental states. Their intentions, their emotions, their likely responses to what you say and do. This is not optional. The social brain runs this process whether you are aware of it or not, and it consumes significant neural resources. Resources that, in solitude, become available for other kinds of processing. There's a concept in social psychology called ego depletion. The observation that the capacity for self-regulation diminishes after sustained social effort. Extended social interaction doesn't just tire the body, it depletes the specific cognitive systems responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and self-control. The person who's been on for hours, performing, adapting, mentalizing, returns home with a self that has been spent, not depressed, spent, and most people have never been taught how to replenish it. This is the hidden cost of relational overload that almost no one names directly. It is not that people drain you. It is that sustained social engagement requires you to continuously organize yourself around someone else's presence, to modulate your responses, to track their emotional state, to manage the gap between what you feel and what you show. Over time, this continuous self-modulation creates a specific kind of exhaustion, the exhaustion of a self that has spent so long performing itself for others that it has partially forgotten what it actually is. In 2003, psychologist Esther Buchholz published research challenging one of developmental psychology's most cherished assumptions, that human well-being is fundamentally relational, that the need for connection is the primary psychological drive. Buchholz didn't dispute the importance of connection. She argued that the need for solitude is equally fundamental, equally biological, equally wired into the human system, but almost entirely absent from psychological theory and practice. She called it the alone time need, not a preference, not an introvert trait, a need. The The neuroscience supports Buchholz. The default mode network, the neural system most active when the brain is not focused on external tasks, is the seat of self-referential processing, memory consolidation, imaginative thinking, moral reasoning, and construction of personal narrative. This network cannot function optimally under continuous social stimulation. It requires downtime, not sleep, though sleep is critical. Asterisk, but wakeful, undirected inner time. The kind of time that solitude specifically makes available. The mind, in other words, needs to be alone with itself in order to become itself. And this is where the research becomes specific about what solitude actually does. Studies on solitude and creativity consistently show that the most generative insights, the breakthroughs, the connections, the solutions that felt impossible under pressure, arise not during focused work, but during periods of relaxed, solitary attention. The walk alone, the shower, the quiet room with no agenda. These are not interruptions to the work. They are the conditions under which the most important work happens. The mind, given space, does what was built to do, and it cannot do this while managing the constant presence of another. The historical record on solitude and intellectual achievement is overwhelming and almost universally ignored. Newton made his most important discoveries during 18 months of isolation when Cambridge closed due to plague. Darwin spent decades at Down House, deliberately isolated from London's social world, maintaining a daily solitary walk that he described as essential to his thinking. Kafka wrote almost exclusively in the hours after his family had gone to sleep. In silence, alone, using the aloneness as both the condition and the content of his work. These were not people who lacked social skills. They were people who had learned what solitude was for. The contemplative traditions understood this long before neuroscience had the tools to explain it. The desert fathers of early Christianity retreated to the Egyptian desert not to escape the world, but to find, in the silence, a quality of attention that the noise of social life made impossible. Zen Buddhist practice centers on Zazen, sitting meditation, which is at its core the disciplined practice of being alone with one's own mind without fleeing from it. The insight that both traditions arrived at is the same insight the research now confirms. The self is not discovered in relationship. It is recovered in solitude. Blaise Pascal wrote, in the 17th century, that all of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Asterisk, he wasn't prescribing monasticism. He was observing something precise about the relationship between the avoidance of solitude and the avoidance of self-knowledge. The person who cannot be alone with themselves cannot know themselves. And the person who cannot know themselves is, in the deepest sense, always dependent on others to tell them who they are. There is a cost to a life that never includes solitude that is almost never discussed directly. It doesn't show up as a crisis. It shows up as a slow erosion of the capacity to be the author of one's own experience. The person who has never learned to be alone without distraction has, in a meaningful sense, outsourced the management of their inner life to the constant presence of others. Their emotions are regulated by company. Their thoughts are organized by conversation. Their sense of self is validated by social feedback. And the moment the company disappears, the moment the phone is down, the room is empty, the silence becomes audible, they feel not peace but panic. Psychologist Sherry Tickle spent years studying what she called the flight from conversation, the progressive replacement of solitary reflection with constant digital connection. Her findings were precise. People who never experienced genuine solitude showed diminished capacity for empathy, for self-reflection, and for tolerating the ambiguity that complex relationships inevitably contain, not because they were less intelligent, not because they cared less, but because the skills of interiority, the capacity to sit with one's own discomfort, to process one's own experience without immediate external input, are skills that require practice, and they can only be practiced alone. And this is the irony that closes a loop. The person who avoids solitude in order to feel less alone becomes, over time, more fundamentally alone, because they lose access to the only self that genuine connection requires. You cannot connect authentically with another person if you have no stable sense of who you are when no one is watching. Solitude is not the alternative to relationship. It is the precondition for it. The self that enters relationship, having never been alone with itself, is not a self. It is a reflection of whatever the nearest mirror shows. Solitude is not a retreat from life. It is not a luxury for contemplative or a symptom of the unsociable. It is a fundamental psychological need, as basic in its way as the need for sleep, for movement, for the company of others. The mind needs to be alone with itself in order to know itself. It needs silence in order to hear itself. It needs the absence of external demand in order to discover what it actually wants. The person who has never learned to be alone with themselves has never met themselves, not fully, and the relationship with the self, quiet, unglamorous, conducted without audience, is the only relationship that makes all the others possible. You don't need to be witnessed to exist. You just need to be present to yourself. Inner observer. Observe your mind. Understand reality.